The story began with a young man named Ryudo, standing in the spring of his 16th year. While tending to the crops in his father's field, he attempted to use green magic to draw all the water out of a plant. As expected, nothing happened. Green magic, after all, only possessed the power to grant life, not manipulate it. He couldn't help but think how much easier things might have been if he could use other forms of magic too. Just then, a voice called out to him from behind. A man approached and informed him that a letter had arrived from the royal capital's magic academy. Later, when Ryudo returned to town, he found a huge crowd gathered. Everyone was buzzing with excitement. The village's prodigy had finally been accepted into the prestigious Royal Videl Magic Academy. Nothing like this had ever happened in their small Portos village. The news became even more astonishing when they learned he had received a recommendation from one of the capital's influential figures. The villagers showered him with warm congratulations, and he expressed his gratitude to each of them. Among them was a girl named Mia. She approached him shyly, offering a handmade charm and explaining that she had crafted it while praying for his safety. Ryudo accepted it with genuine appreciation, promising to treasure it. But in the next moment, Mia grew emotional and burst into tears, reminding him to take care of himself, to eat properly, and so on, while he tried gently to calm her. Nearby, two men watched the scene with amusement, joking that if she was that worried, she might as well go with him. Setting the teasing aside, Ryudo reassured Mia that he would give everything he had at the Royal Academy and work hard to become a fine mage. Until then, he asked her not to cry and instead keep smiling. She wiped her tears and, with a soft smile, told him she would be waiting for him happily. After that, his mother stepped forward as well. She assured him that he didn't need to worry about home, insisting that all she wanted was for him to do his best and give his all at the academy. The rest of the villagers shared the same sentiment. They cheered him on, proud of the boy who excelled at both magic and studies, wishing him the very best as he prepared for his journey to the royal capital. The night of celebration passed in a blur, and soon the day of Ryudo's departure arrived. He boarded the carriage and bid farewell to everyone who had gathered to see him off. But from afar, perched quietly on the branch of a tree, a lone girl watched him go. She whispered her goodbye in silence, unseen by the crowd. On the road to the capital, Ryudo carried a firm resolve. He intended to use this opportunity to succeed, to become a mage who would protect the kingdom of Vienna and make his village proud. However, 4 years later, at the age of 20, that hopeful dream stood in sharp contrast to reality. Now he stood before the academy's headmaster, and the atmosphere was filled with fury. The headmaster hurled a stack of documents at him, battle reports, demanding he look at the chaos he had caused. According to those reports, Ryudo hadn't even taken part in the front lines. He did nothing except ride around using what the headmaster mockingly called his country bumpkin horsemanship. Headmaster Alphonse glared at him and declared that he had dragged the academy's crest through the mud, staining the pride of their nation. 4 years earlier, everyone had spoken in awe about him, the boy who received a personal recommendation from the Celestial Star King, the first student in 1,000 years admitted from outside the capital, and the first green magic user in the Royal Videl Magic Academy's history. But now, Alphonse said it had all proven to be nothing but a deceptive facade protecting a useless fool. He continued shouting, insisting that a mage who caused only confusion on the battlefield held no value whatsoever. Ryudo tried to explain that he had only been using support magic to ensure their comrades avoided harm, but the headmaster refused to hear him. To Alphonse, a green mage on the wasteland was worth even less than an insect. The reports made it obvious, he said. Ryudo didn't possess even a fragment of talent, and he demanded to know whether Ryudo had managed to master even a single magic of another color. The answer, he said, was already clear. With that, Alphonse concluded that the nation did not have the luxury to harbor the talentless. The Royal Academy had no need for people like him, and he declared Ryudo banished. Frustration churned inside Ryudo, but there was nothing he could say in return, so he simply bowed his head, accepted the decision, and left the headmaster's office. Later, while he was packing his belongings, a noble lady, Felice, appeared. She asked whether he truly intended to give up so easily. Ryudo replied that there wasn't much he could do, since the Chancellor himself had ordered his expulsion. But hearing that only angered her further. She raised her voice, insisting that the Chancellor knew nothing about him and had no right to speak ill of him. Only she understood that his support magic had been the sole reason their comrades had suffered 0 casualties. She couldn't comprehend why he allowed others to belittle him, mock him, and call him useless, while he simply accepted it with a smile. Ryudo only continued smiling softly. He mentioned that it had already been 4 years since he arrived, and he believed himself to be nothing more than a lucky, ordinary boy who had survived among geniuses. Even Felice, celebrated as a once-in-a-century prodigy, had trained with him, and he was genuinely grateful for that. Felice stopped him right there, demanding to know whether he had already forgotten that he was the first man, besides her father, who had ever defeated her. Her voice wavered slightly, revealing how emotional she had become. Seeing that, Ryudo gently asked if she was all right. She quickly turned away, insisting it was nothing, and he thanked her for thinking so highly of him. Still, he reminded her that the only reason he had won that match was because she had chosen conditions that favored him. But that didn't matter to her. She pointed out that even under equal conditions, none of the others at the academy had ever managed to land a single hit on her. Setting the topic aside for the moment, Ryudo assured her that he had already decided what he would do after leaving the academy. There was more than one way he could support the kingdom. He picked up a dried flower and explained that there was one thing he would never lose in, no matter who stood against him. That one thing was green magic. To demonstrate, he released green mana into the flower, and it slowly regained its brilliance. Green magic, Layut, was a magic of high affinity, but it relied entirely on the green mana produced by the forest's plants. Once a mage left the forest, the dwelling place of the green goddess, the magic's effect weakened drastically. With the rise of gates connected to other worlds and the appearance of monsters, the mage corps and night orders had been formed. Yet at gate outbreak sites such as wastelands and cities, green mana no longer existed. Felice still looked uneasy about his decision, but he thanked her once again and asked her to accept the flower he held. She admitted she wasn't fond of ornaments, but he explained that this tamari flower came from his hometown, Portos, if she would accept it. This flower filled with his green magic. He felt it would give meaning to the 4 years he had spent at the academy. Hearing this, she didn't argue further and agreed to listen. Ryudo stepped closer and gently placed the flower in her hair. She seemed to grow fond of it instantly, thanking him softly and promising to treasure it always. Just then, Thomas and Eric entered the room, searching for Ryudo. But the moment they saw him standing so close to Felice, they immediately assumed they were intruding and tried to leave, saying they would give the two of them some privacy. Ryudo quickly called out to stop them, insisting it wasn't what they thought. Felice, meanwhile, was nearly collapsing from embarrassment. Soon after, 2 more boys joined in. They had all heard the news of Ryudo's exile. Regardless of what had happened, none of them wanted him to leave without a proper farewell. Thomas even brought out his prized wine, insisting they share a drink together before Ryudo's departure. As they all sat down, Ryudo felt deeply grateful for them. He thanked each one of them, promising that he would continue supporting them in his own way, through his farming. Eventually, the time came for him to leave the academy for good. A group of guards arrived to accompany him out. Ryudo paused for a moment and looked back at the place that had been his home for the past 4 years. Then, with quiet resolve, he turned away, ready to move forward and leave everything behind. As he traveled back toward his village in the carriage, he couldn't stop thinking about what he would say once he arrived. The villagers had been so happy when he joined the Royal Academy, and because they were all so kind, he was certain they would still treat him as if nothing had happened. Yet he also understood that returning in this state would only disappoint them. Meanwhile, outside the carriage, one of the knights complained to their captain, asking why they had been assigned such a boring mission, guarding someone who had dropped out. Another knight immediately corrected him, saying that guarding a mage as talented as Ryudo was an honor in itself. The captain remained logical and simply reminded them that it was their duty to carry out any mission they were given. Noticing the troubled expression on Ryudo's face through the open window, the captain asked if something was weighing on his mind. Ryudo admitted that even though he had been labeled a failure, he was still thinking about how he could be useful to the kingdom. To do that, he believed he needed to engrave the knight's chivalry deep in his heart as well. All 3 guards were momentarily taken aback by his resolve, but a warm smile formed on the captain's face. He assured Ryudo that he did not need to worry, as they would accompany him to his village with pride. Later, as they continued their journey, Ryudo drifted off to sleep in the carriage. But suddenly, a loud bang jolted him awake, and the carriage came to an abrupt halt. He immediately opened the door to see what was happening, only for the captain to come hurtling back and crash into the carriage. The captain was severely injured, yet he still managed to inform Ryudo that they had been ambushed by a pack of moon wolves and urged him to hide immediately. Ryudo tried to help the captain, while the other 2 knights stood frozen in disbelief. They could not understand how the wolves were able to bite through metal armor as if it were nothing. The creatures surrounding them were moon wolves, magical beasts whose savagery intensified with the lunar phases, and they had already taken down several of their horses. Even so, the captain forced himself back to his feet. As a proud knight of the Vienna kingdom, he absolutely refused to be defeated by something like a Moonwolf. He charged straight toward them, ignoring Ryudo's attempt to stop him. Determined to show Ryudo what it truly meant to be a knight, he vowed that as long as he could still swing his sword, he would never show his back to an enemy. With that conviction, he launched into battle against the pack. Ryudo watched in awe as the captain's beautiful swordsmanship overwhelmed the wolves, even under the full moon. Inspired by his display, the other two knights finally snapped out of their shock and rushed forward to join the fight. Just as the captain was about to behead one of the wolves, another emerged from behind and struck him, sending him flying once more and slamming him into the carriage. His sword slipped from his hand, and the wolf seized it in its jaws, crushing the blade without hesitation. The knights rushed to the captain's side, shaken by the realization that not even his swordsmanship was enough against these beasts. With no other option, they attempted to retreat. However, the captain refused, declaring that abandoning their mission and fleeing before the enemy was behavior unworthy of a knight. He would not betray his oath of loyalty and was determined to complete the mission, no matter the outcome. Just then, Ryudo stepped forward and called out to the moon wolves, attempting to draw their attention toward himself. He hurled a fireball spell toward the wolves. They dodged it effortlessly, of course, but it provoked them exactly as he intended, shifting all of their attention onto him. Ryudo immediately urged the knights to use this opening to escape into the forest, assuring them that he would handle the wolves himself. The captain, though injured, was stunned to realize that Ryudo could use red magic as well. The knights followed his instructions and ran, while Ryudo quietly admitted to himself that he wasn't actually that skilled. In fact, the fireball he created had been nothing more than a fake. Even so, it was the only way he could force the wolves to retreat, because he refused to let the captain die from such a deep wound. One of the wolves lunged toward the lantern and shattered it, extinguishing the only source of light. The sudden darkness caught Ryudo off guard as he realized these wolves were far more cunning than he had assumed. With the fire gone, he couldn't see anything, not even the sound of their breathing remained. The wolves had blended perfectly with the night, preparing an ambush from the shadows, and considering that the knights themselves had struggled against them, these beasts were clearly several levels above him when it came to combat on open ground. But here in the forest, things were different. Surrounded by nature, the possibilities of his green magic were limitless. He cast a spell to detect their precise locations in the pitch-black darkness, and was shocked to see all three wolves coordinating their movements for a simultaneous attack. He quickly decided to restrict their mobility first and used Root Entangle to bind them, but they slipped past the roots with ease and began circling him again. In the blink of an eye, they closed in and attacked together, but the instant their fangs met resistance, they realized something was wrong. Ryudo drew a sword and forced them back. Using his green magic, he had created an entire suit of armor made from interwoven roots. With a calm, confident smirk, he thought to himself that this portywood armor, infused with green mana, was even stronger than metal plate, something the wolves were clearly beginning to understand, judging by their rising fury. He also knew that if he lost here, the knights who had retreated would be in danger as well, so he planted his feet firmly on the ground, refusing to back down. Right there, under the cover of the night forest, he was determined to stop the moon wolves no matter what. The fight continued relentlessly as the three wolves attacked him from every direction. He managed to block their strikes, but he couldn't land a single hit in return. He understood that his swordsmanship wouldn't hold up for long in a 3-against-1 battle, so he planned to take them down individually to gain the advantage. But before he could act, one wolf lunged forward and bit his leg. The armor absorbed the impact, so he took no damage, but his leg was now pinned, leaving him unable to move. Another wolf seized the opening and bit down on his arm, locking it in place and preventing him from lifting his sword. Immobile, he felt the third wolf closing in from behind. With no options left, he attempted to unleash a wide-range spell to take all of them down, but before he could fully cast it, the wolves leaped backward with remarkable speed, widening the distance instantly. Ryudo was stunned. Not only were they incredibly fast, they were also highly sensitive to magic. Restricting their movements was going to be far more difficult than he expected. To make matters worse, his stamina and mana were quickly draining, and he realized that a prolonged fight would only push him deeper into disadvantage. Suddenly, one of the wolves rushed straight at him and struck with full force, sending him flying backward. He tried once more to attack with magic, but as expected, the wolves immediately jumped high into the air to evade it. But this time, that was exactly what he had been waiting for. The moment they were suspended mid-air, he charged his sword with green magic and struck all three of them at once, slamming them into the ground with overwhelming power. It had been a complete gamble, and he wasn't sure it worked, but when he looked more closely, he was shocked to see the wolves still moving, even after being hit by a spell that exceeded normal limits. Desperate, he tried to restrain them again using green magic, but he could already feel his mana nearly depleted. Even so, he knew there wouldn't be another opportunity like this, so he forced himself to keep pushing, using every last bit of energy he had to bind them with massive entangling roots. At last, he managed to trap them. He collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily, unable to believe it had worked. He had poured everything he had into that spell, and he was certain that even powerful moon wolves should at least be held down for a while. But then, without warning, the wolves shattered the roots as if they were nothing, leaving him frozen in disbelief. The wolves surrounded him again. He had nothing left, no mana, no strength, and even his magical armor faded away. His body felt cold, his throat dry, and the reality of the situation began to settle in. In that quiet, helpless moment, the only thought that drifted through his mind was how wonderful it would have been to taste Mia's stew one last time. Just then, his eyes fell on the small charm Mia had given him when he left the village all those years ago. Memories came rushing back. Mia, his mother, and all the villagers who believed he was the most talented one in the entire village, placing their hopes on him. Thinking about everyone who had trusted him, he refused to die there. He didn't want to be the cause of their sorrow, and with that determination burning inside him, he charged straight toward the moon wolves. But before he could reach them, a girl descended from the sky and landed directly on top of him. She wrapped her arms around him, overjoyed to see him after such a long time. He was happy as well, but he quickly pointed out the wolves, reminding her that they were in serious danger. Vivian pouted, accusing him of changing the subject, and mentioned that she had already noticed the 3 dogs. He immediately corrected her, explaining that they were not dogs but moon wolves, and it was a full moon night on top of that. Yet she didn't seem to care in the slightest. To her, they were nothing more than pests standing in her way. With a dangerous gleam in her eyes, she suggested that the 2 of them should wipe out those 3 dogs in an instant simply because they could. He tried once more to explain that things weren't as simple as she believed, especially since he had already used up all of his mana. But that didn't faze her either. She responded casually that there was still plenty of mana he could use. Then she leaned in close and insisted they perform their usual ritual. He stopped her immediately, reminding her that it had been 10 years and he was no longer a child. She grew furious at that, saying she had been waiting all this time specifically for this moment. He tried to calm her down, pointing out that they had agreed they no longer needed that ritual, but as expected, she ignored any logic. She wanted to do it purely because she wanted to. She smacked him on the head repeatedly, telling him to knock it off. Then, without warning, she kissed him on the cheek, completing her ritual at last. The moment her lips touched him, an overwhelming surge of mana rushed through his body. The sensation reminded him of the divine power he once felt when merging with the green goddess Vivian. It was nostalgic, and just like always, he could sense an immense well of mana inside him, all thanks to her. Vivian, meanwhile, was simply delighted that she could help him again. Suddenly, one of the wolves attacked from behind and bit into his arm. But in the next instant, Ryudo vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a scattering of leaves. The wolves froze, confused, sniffing desperately for his scent. Now that he had merged with Vivian, he had become someone capable of dissolving into nature itself, with complete control over the entire forest. A vision of an unfamiliar spell rose within his mind, yet he instinctively understood what it could do. He cast it on a nearby tree, and immediately the massive trunk began to shift and grow. Before his eyes, the tree twisted and reshaped itself into a towering walking giant. Ryudo was stunned by its size, hardly able to believe he had created something like that. Vivian explained cheerfully that he had combined black magic with green magic. The spell was known as the Living Forest. As the towering giant prepared to smash the 3 wolves, Vivian watched from behind with excitement, eager to see them get obliterated, while Ryudo tried to stop the attack, believing it was far too excessive. But time was running out, and just as he saw the wolves trembling as the giant's fist descended toward them, a long-buried memory surfaced, something from when he was just a child. Years ago, his father had taken him into the wild to teach him how to hunt. After catching a rabbit, his father told him to finish the job. Young Ryudo hesitated, asking whether they truly had to do it since he was beginning to feel sorry for the rabbit. His father gently reminded him that humans lived by receiving life, whether from plants or animals, which was why they never wasted any part of what they hunted. To put it simply, needless killing was never acceptable. With those words, his father ended the rabbit's life. As he helped skin the rabbit afterward, Ryudo felt uneasy, but he understood that it was something that needed to be done. His father told him never to forget that feeling, insisting that his heart was stronger and kinder than anyone else's, and that he should hold on to that without ever changing. Returning to the present, Ryudo realized that he wasn't sensing any hostility from the moon wolves anymore, and there was no reason to kill them. Acting quickly, he used his magic to redirect the giant's punch. The wolves narrowly escaped what would have been a fatal blow, and Ryudo sighed in relief when he saw them unharmed. The wolves then turned and fled from the area. Vivian demanded to know why he had done that, and he explained that the wolves were already drained of mana, meaning they wouldn't be attacking anyone for a while. There was no need to eliminate them. He climbed down from the green giant and released the spell, allowing the massive figure to return to its original form, a tree. Ryudo was relieved everything had ended without disaster. He had genuinely feared that the entire forest would be destroyed in the battle. Moments later, Vivian appeared outside again and immediately hugged him tightly, officially welcoming him home. Ryudo, happy to see her after so long, thanked her for helping him in the fight. Just as he expected, the mana output of the green goddess was overwhelmingly powerful. Vivian simply stated that it was only natural. She had been the guardian goddess of that region for a very long time. More importantly, she pointed out that the green giant spell he had just used wasn't something an ordinary person could accomplish. He was different. His mana vessel, she said, was as vast as the ocean. Ryudo accepted the compliment, but mentioned that he still felt useless in the royal capital, so it didn't matter. Vivian corrected him gently, reminding him that while green magic was extraordinary, it barely functioned outside the forest. Regardless of all that, she assured him that he no longer needed to worry, as long as she and the forest were with him. Coming back to the matter at hand, she gave him an intimidating look and suggested that they should go and destroy the Royal Magical Academy that had disrespected Ryudo and kicked him out. The idea sent chills down his spine, and he stopped her immediately, insisting that it wasn't necessary at all. He also reminded her that she couldn't leave the forest anyway, which only made her more frustrated. Putting that aside for the moment, he mentioned that a group of knights had been guarding him up to this point, but they had now headed toward the capital. All of them were injured and now stranded in a monster-filled forest, so he asked her to help him save those knights. She clearly didn't want to, but because it was his request, she reluctantly agreed. The scene then shifted to the knights, struggling through the forest while carrying their wounded captain. They moved in fear through the creepy darkness, but they couldn't afford to wait for morning because of the captain's injuries. Suddenly, the forest itself began to move, opening a clear path before them. Overjoyed, the knights believed it to be the will of the green goddess. Grateful for the miracle, they hurried out of the forest, hoping Ryudo was safe as well. Meanwhile, back with Vivian and Ryudo, he thanked her for helping the knights. She remarked that even after everything, he was still such a soft-hearted person. At the same time, she admitted she was glad he hadn't changed, since she had worried the capital might lead him astray and turn him into someone unrecognizable. He shared that the capital indeed had all kinds of people, but when it came to magic, he was still completely hopeless. Because of that, he had been expelled from the academy and had returned home with nothing. But she argued that it wasn't true at all. From the moment he stepped back into the village, she could sense a huge change in him. Just recently, he had managed to use black magic, white magic, and even red and blue magic, which was no small feat. He cut her off, saying she was giving him far too much credit since he couldn't even use those spells properly, but she disagreed. He had just given life to a massive tree, something impossible without black magic, the magic that manipulates life itself. On top of that, she could feel it within him. Alongside his incredible flow of green mana, there were faint traces of every other kind of mana sprouting inside him, something she had never witnessed before. In short, she could tell he had worked extremely hard in the royal capital. Praising him for that, she gently patted his head, leaving him speechless. He thanked her for the compliments, but suddenly he began to feel dizzy, as if all his strength were draining away. He assumed it had to be the backlash from the magic he had just used. Vivian apologized as well, admitting she had gotten carried away because she was simply too happy to see him again. He understood that, but for the moment, he just asked her to let him lean on her shoulder. Later, he finally returned to his village, where everyone greeted him with excitement. They were certain that he must have excelled in his studies and would surely have been assigned to the Magic Corps or something similar. Instead, with deep regret, he apologized for disappointing them and explained that his grades had been so poor the headmaster had expelled him. The villagers were stunned. At first, they thought he was joking. After all, he had always been their pride. They asked if the city air hadn't suited him, or if he had been bullied at the academy. They wanted to know exactly what had happened. Then, out of nowhere, Vivian appeared and hugged him tightly, prompting even more questions from everyone. If things had been so tough for him, then what was he doing with that girl? Ryudo was just as shocked. He had no idea why she was there, while Vivian simply wanted to kiss him. His mother could hardly believe what she was seeing. He hadn't sent a single letter home in 4 years, and now it looked like he had fallen into temptation in the royal capital. The villagers, too, began to wonder if he had been corrupted by the city, while he desperately tried to explain himself. But then, without warning, Vivian declared that the two of them had become one just the previous night. He froze, realizing that her statement was only going to make things worse and far more confusing. Hearing that, Mia burst into tears and called him a cheater. Panic set in as he tried to clarify the situation and insist that none of this was true, until he suddenly woke up and realized it had all been a nightmare. Even so, that dream made him even more anxious about returning to Portos. At that moment, Vivian approached him and asked what kind of dream he had seen. He was startled to find her so close, and she questioned why he looked like he had just seen a ghost when she had even given him a lap pillow. His head was still throbbing painfully, and he realized it was the aftereffect of overusing his mana engine the previous night. Vivian apologized again for pushing him so hard. She assured him that there was nothing to worry about. These symptoms were simply a mana control issue. Meanwhile, he thought to himself that even though he had narrowly escaped death, his reality hadn't changed, and he wondered what he was supposed to do next. Then Vivian gently took his hand and shyly asked if the two of them could stay together from now on. He fell silent for a moment, thinking about how he didn't have anywhere else to go now that he had let everyone down. In the end, he nodded and told her that he would remain in the village for the time being. That made her incredibly happy, since they could finally play together in the forest like they used to. With that, she suggested they hurry up and head to Porto's village right away. Ryudo's expression shifted, and he suddenly looked a bit stressed. Noticing this, she asked him what was bothering him, and he explained that it felt strange for someone like him, a dropout, to return home with a girl after so long. She couldn't believe he was still worried about things like that, but before she could say anything more, his attention drifted elsewhere. He spotted a cat perched on top of a tree and wondered what it was doing there. Vivian commented that the beasts living in the forest each found their own ways to survive against the monsters. Feeling guilty, he guessed the cat must have been frightened after witnessing the magic he used the other day, and he wanted to help it. He began climbing the tree to rescue it, and Vivian warned him to be careful since he still hadn't fully recovered. He reassured her that she didn't need to worry because he was quite good at climbing. Watching him act so selflessly once again made her realize he truly hadn't changed at all. When he finally reached the cat, he picked it up and apologized for scaring it. In response, the cat gently licked his face, which made Vivian a bit jealous. She lifted the cat herself and reminded it that a stray should behave like a stray. Then she sent it running off, while Ryudo remarked that there was nothing wrong with relying on someone just a little. She asked if he really liked cats that much, and he admitted that he found them extremely cute. Hearing that, she decided to do what he liked. In an instant, she transformed herself into a cat. He froze in shock, completely stunned, as he had never known she possessed that ability. This form made it easier for her to accompany him back to the village without any problems, and since she couldn't speak human language like this, it was convenient as well. From her side, she simply wanted to stay close to him because she knew how kind he was to everyone, and that was exactly why she couldn't help but worry about him. Later, with Vivian perched on his shoulder, he finally made his way back to his hometown, Volto's village. A shabby signboard stood before him, the same one around which all the villagers had gathered to send him off when he first left. Back then, everyone had celebrated his departure, and remembering that moment now, he had no idea what kind of expression he was supposed to wear after returning empty-handed. Vivian tried to cheer him up, and he appreciated how thoughtful she was being. As he walked further in, he was surprised to see that even after 4 years, nothing had changed. The peaceful atmosphere felt completely different from the royal capital, and it brought him a sense of comfort. He noticed a villager working in the fields and recalled that around this time of year, they usually spread compost matured over the winter and tilled the soil. Everything looked exactly the same as it had when he left, which surprised him even more. Eventually, he reached his home. He remembered how his mother always encouraged him to do his best, telling him not to worry about her even if he stayed away for a while. He also remembered Felice repeatedly telling him to return home during vacations, yet he always chose to remain at the academy for extra studies, hoping to catch up with everyone else. He had planned to write to his mother once he had actual results to show her, but in the end, He had not managed to send a single letter in all 4 years. He didn't even know where to begin, whether he should tell her immediately that he had failed or first apologize for never contacting her. But before he could sort out his thoughts, the door opened and his mother stepped outside. Her eyes widened in disbelief, while he simply let out a small chuckle and said that he was home. She rushed forward and hugged him so tightly that he lost his balance, and they both fell to the ground. He quickly apologized and asked if she was all right. She held him with teary eyes, overjoyed to see him, and welcomed him back home. Later, as they sat together, he told her everything that had happened. Hearing what he had gone through made her feel terrible for him, but among everything, she couldn't understand how they could simply cast him aside like that. Ryudo, however, was surprised by how easily she accepted him back. Realizing that all his worries had been unnecessary, she immediately sensed what was on his mind and reminded him that he had always been strong academically, and when it came to green magic, no mage could surpass him. He agreed, but deep down he knew that his green magic worked only because he was in this specific environment near the village, and because Vivian supported him. His mother then noticed the cat accompanying him and asked if he had brought it from the capital. He explained that he had found her in the forest while returning to the village. She was shocked to hear he had picked up such an elegant cat in the Porthos forest. Its refined aura made her certain it must have been from the capital. She asked whether he had given the cat a name yet. He hadn't really thought about it, but he quickly came up with one and told her the cat's name was Vivi. His mother was delighted by the name, saying it resembled the village's guardian deity, Vivian. Meanwhile, he could tell Vivian didn't like the name at all, and he laughed nervously. Setting that aside, he asked if they had any fresh milk to give Vivi. His mother agreed that it was a great idea. He poured some milk for Vivi, and the moment she tasted it, she was shocked by how incredibly delicious it was. Ryudo could clearly tell she loved it, and he explained that Podol's village produced its own milk and crops, which were considered the best on the entire continent. His mother wasn't entirely convinced and asked him if the capital wasn't the place where first-class chefs and the finest ingredients gathered. He agreed that it was, but pointed out that there was one thing the capital could never buy: time. The green mana around the capital had withered away, turning the surrounding lands into a wasteland. Even though there was water, all food had to be transported from far away. He picked up a honey apple from the dining table and mentioned that in the capital, nothing ever came fresh. After taking a bite, nostalgia washed over him as he remembered how amazing these apples used to taste. The honey apples in the royal capital were always old and dried out, and recently, food distribution had worsened because monsters kept appearing from the gate. As a result, they often had no choice but to eat dried meat and withered vegetables. He wished Felice and the others could try these fresh crops as well. With that settled, his mother decided to head to the fields. Ryudo immediately offered to go with her, thinking that even after a long time, he should at least be able to help with something. But she suggested that he take it easy for a while, since he had just returned from a long journey, and besides, the workload during spring was especially heavy. Still, because it was spring, he didn't want to stay behind. He felt restless unless he was actually doing something. More than that, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had accomplished nothing during the past 4 years, despite everyone's expectations. His mother didn't share that view at all. With a gentle smile, she told him that she didn't believe anything he had done was a waste. Her words left him completely speechless. Since he genuinely wanted to help, she told him to get changed quickly, reminding him that he couldn't possibly work in the fields while dressed so neatly. She pointed toward a shelf, mentioning that she had kept his father's clothes there, and she suspected they would fit him perfectly now. He didn't fully understand what she meant and asked her to repeat it, but she brushed it aside and said she would wait for him outside. Ryudo changed into the farm clothes and was surprised to see that they really did fit him perfectly. Even though he couldn't make his father proud by joining the magic army, he still wanted to be useful in another way. With that determination, he stepped outside, ready to work the fields. Meanwhile, Mia was dashing through the village. She had overheard a couple of uncles talking on the road, saying that someone wearing a Magic Academy uniform had arrived. Without a doubt, she knew it had to be Ryudo. Excited beyond measure, she ran toward his home, eager to see him again after all this time. The narration then shifted to a brief history of Porto's village. It had once been a place sealed under winter, but now only faint traces of lingering snow remained in the shade of the trees. Over the years, snow, frost, and drought had taken turns battering the land, packing the soil of the fields until it became hard and unyielding. Because of that, to plant vegetables for the summer harvest, the fields needed to be tilled over and over to soften the earth, with fully matured compost folded into the soil. Tilling, spreading, and tilling again. This cycle repeated endlessly, and that was exactly what Ryudo and his mother did throughout the day. Before he even realized it, the sun had fully set. He finally sat down to catch his breath, feeling completely exhausted. He admitted to himself that he had pushed a little too hard and was certain he would be sore the next day. Vivi heard that and decided to help by hopping onto his shoulder to give him a massage, but instead of easing his pain, she only ended up hurting him even more. At that moment, his mother approached and thanked him warmly, saying his help had made everything much easier for her. With the work finished, she suggested that he should go visit Mia, mentioning that Mia had been wanting to see him for a long time. Hearing her name, Ryudo recalled how every time he felt close to giving up, it was Mia's charm that pushed him forward again, and for him, the true taste of home was always her stew. His mother teased him lightly, saying Mia had grown quite beautiful over the past 4 years, and he admitted she probably had. However, he wasn't sure if now was the right time to visit her. Shocked, his mother asked what could possibly be more important than seeing his beloved childhood friend. He immediately clarified that things between him and Mia were not like that at all. Besides, upon returning to the village, he had already decided there was one place he wanted to visit before anything else, his father's field. Hearing this, his mother was taken aback. She questioned why he would want to go there when nothing could grow on that land anymore, but a single look at his expression told her he was determined. She chose not to argue further and decided to accompany him. As they walked down the road, Ryudo remembered how many times he had traveled this very path with his mother when he was a child. The land his father had left behind, the farmland passed down for generations, was one of the largest in all of Portos, where farming was the main livelihood. There had been a time when this field produced the village's greatest harvest. Crowds of people farmed together, and the fields were always full of songs and laughter. The taste of vegetables grown in that nourished soil, along with the pure water from the streams, had been exceptional. Merchants from the royal capital and even from other countries competed to buy the crops. That was how highly valued they once were. His mother reminisced about those days too, recalling how every day had been filled with happiness when she carried Ryudo on her back and his father walked beside them. But suddenly, she brushed those memories aside, insisting she had no good recollections of that time. Ryudo, confused, pointed out that it still wasn't confirmed whether his father was truly dead or not. For nearly 10 years now, the frequency of the gates that spawned monsters had been increasing throughout the kingdom. Because of that, many people traveled to the royal capital seeking fame or quick earnings, taking up work as soldiers, mercenaries, or most commonly, adventurers. It was during the rise of that trend that his father had suddenly vanished. One after another, young people began leaving the village, causing the number of farmhands to drop drastically. Ryudo and his mother somehow managed to protect their farms together for a time. But not long after, he too had gone to the royal capital in pursuit of his dream, only for that dream to collapse right before his eyes. He regretted that decision deeply. Now that he had returned home, he was determined to paint a new dream across the vast farmland. He wanted to prove that the words he had once spoken to Felice before leaving the academy were not lies, and that there were indeed many ways to support the kingdom. Eventually, the two of them reached his father's farmland, and the sight left him stunned. The land was no longer fit for farming at all. He had never imagined it would deteriorate so drastically. Now that he had seen it with his own eyes, his mother repeated that the field was hopeless. The village already lacked enough hands, she said, and working on land like this simply wasn't possible anymore. Ryudo decided to walk around alone for a while and told her to call him once he had had enough time to himself. As she walked off, he noticed how her hands had gathered far more calluses than they had 4 years ago. He understood how frustrated she must have been, forced to watch their family's fields crumble with no way to stop it. He refused to believe that the 4 years he spent at the academy had all been for nothing. He wanted to believe there had to be something he could still do to fix this. Then suddenly, an idea came to him. He wondered if he should try using a certain spell he had learned at the academy. He asked Vivian if she could lend him some of her strength. Without hesitation, she returned to her true form and told him there was no need to even ask. She teased him, sounding amused that he was the one asking for a kiss this time, and said she liked that. He quickly tried to explain that it wasn't like that at all. He only needed a little strength from her. She simply reminded him that this was exactly why they needed to kiss. He insisted it wasn't necessary, especially since he could see his mother walking toward them, and they had no time. Even so, Vivian planted a kiss on his cheek, and the moment she did, she merged with him once more. A tremendous surge of mana rushed through his body. With that done, she asked what he planned to do with all that mana, reminding him that green magic couldn't wither plants. He told her he already knew. He had tested that himself many times. Green mana was the source of life. It granted vitality, but had no power to take life away from a plant. Keeping that in mind, he recalled Vivian's earlier words, that when he had used the Living Forest spell, he had been using not only green magic but black magic as well. She confirmed that he had indeed done so, admitting she had never seen anything like that before. If that was the case, he reasoned he might be able to apply the same principle here. So he tried. First, he used green magic to connect green mana to every plant across the field, including the stubborn vines and thick scrub trees with deep roots. After that, he needed absolute precision. Any mistake would turn the entire area into wildfire. He then added red mana on top of the green, and by mixing the two, he created flame and gale. A quiet, unseen fire swept through the field, burning away everything in its path. In that moment, he remembered the vow he had made to Ferris. Using this blend of magic, he cleared the entire field. By the time the flames settled, the land stood open and ready for farming once again. His mother caught the smell of burning grass nearby and wondered where it was coming from, so she returned to Ryudo to ask him. But when she reached him, she stopped in her tracks. The entire field had been cleared, and the scene left her speechless. She asked him if this was his doing, if this was his magic. Ryudo confirmed it, saying it was indeed a spell he had learned at the academy. His mother, however, could barely believe what she was seeing. Overwhelmed with emotion, she wondered aloud if she might truly be able to work in this field again, just like she used to when his father was still around. Ryudo smiled gently and assured her that now that he was home, he could work alongside her as well. His father had taught him a great deal about farming back in the day, and on top of that, he had made an important promise to someone in the royal capital, a promise he needed to fulfill, and this was part of it. Hearing that, she felt genuinely happy and said she was looking forward to it. Still, curiosity got the better of her. She began teasing him, asking whether this mysterious promise meant he had found himself a girlfriend in the royal capital. Ryudo grew flustered and explained that it wasn't anything like that, it had simply been a vow he made. Just then, Vivi heard footsteps approaching and instantly became alert, wondering who it might be. The person who appeared was Mia, bursting with excitement after learning that the rumors were true and that Ryudo had actually returned. But as she ran toward him, she tripped on a stone and fell face first, right onto Vivi. Vivi was completely squashed and struggled desperately to escape. Mia quickly picked her up and apologized, flustered and worried that she had hurt her. Watching her fall like that made Ryudo chuckle, as it reminded him of their old days together. Mia laughed as well and, with a warm smile, finally welcomed him back home. He asked Mia if she was all right, and she quickly stood up, assuring him that she was completely fine. She said she was simply overjoyed to see him again after such a long time. Ryudo, in turn, found himself surprised by how much she had grown in just 4 years. She then grabbed his hand, telling him she had been waiting eagerly for his return, and now that he was finally home, she wanted to throw a big welcome party for him. With excitement, she asked what he wanted to eat. He grew a little flustered by how close she was standing and replied that if she was going to cook for him, he would love to taste her stew once more. He admitted he had been thinking about her stew for a while, and it always brought back warm memories. Hearing that made her incredibly happy, and she promised to make the best stew she could, putting all her skill into it. With that said, she hurried off, telling him to come to the usual square later since she planned to call everyone together. After she left, his mother immediately resumed teasing him, saying he truly had no charm at all. Ryudo found himself admitting internally that she was right. Mia had indeed grown into a very beautiful young woman. Vivian, however, did not appreciate the way he was looking at Mia and, in irritation, bit him on the shoulder. Later, Ryudo brought Vivian to a quiet, isolated spot. Now that they were alone, she returned to her original form and immediately demanded to know what he thought he was doing and why he looked so smitten over a countryside girl. He explained again that it wasn't like that at all. He and Mia were simply childhood friends, and he had only felt nervous because it had been so long since he last saw her, especially now that she looked completely different. Setting that aside, he noticed that Vivian still had her cat ears and asked why she was keeping them on. She told him that even though it was her first attempt at acting like a cat, she had realized the ears were incredibly convenient, and, on top of that, they were cute. He laughed and agreed that they really did suit her well. Hearing his praise made her even happier, and she moved in closer as he hugged her, delighted by the affection. Returning to the reason they were there, the two stood before a massive tree as Vivian asked why he had brought her into this place and what exactly they were planning to do in the Tatis forest. The Tatis forest lay deep within the greater Portos forest and was considered so dangerous that even seasoned adventurers from the village refused to approach it. Ryudo recalled that when he was a child, he had once asked his mother why no one could enter Tatis Forest, and she had told him the story behind the large shield displayed in the village square. Long ago, there had been a legendary adventurer party known as the Brave Ones. Together, they had achieved countless feats. They defeated a mighty dragon that had threatened the kingdom, discovered ancient ruins that existed only in myths, developed new medicines one after another, and even managed to partially decipher the principles behind hybrid magic. Around 20 years ago, that famed adventure party visited Porto's village in search of powerful magical beasts and unknown materials. During their exploration, they challenged the uncharted territory of the demon realm, the Tatis jungle. The villagers had been convinced that the legendary adventurer party would conquer the jungle without any difficulty. Yet only moments after entering, the party returned unexpectedly. When the villagers asked if they had forgotten something, they were stunned. The entire party had been beaten terribly, and their leader fell to his knees begging for help. Even the strongest adventurers had been unable to break through the walls of the dense sea of trees. In truth, they had been overwhelmed instantly. Only the leader had survived, and even he soon retired from adventuring, unable to bear the memory of the terror he encountered in that forest. The shield of the fierce warrior, shattered during their attempt, still stood in the village square. Its broken form served as a warning that no one should ever enter the Tatis jungle. It reminded everyone that stepping inside meant certain death. Back in the present, Vivian remarked that it was a horrifying story, as if the forest itself moved with the intent to devour. Ryudo added that such danger was unavoidable because the mana whirlpool around Mount Tatis was incredibly strong. Even he could not control his mana properly here, and metal equipment became nearly useless. On top of that, people often lost their sense of self in this forest. Ferocious beasts roamed within as well, creatures powerful enough to crush even the strongest adventurers, but many of them happened to be in hibernation at the moment. He explained that the only reason he could move freely through such a dangerous magical realm was because of the blessing granted to him by the green goddess Vivian. His primary purpose for coming to this forest was to collect rare fruits that could not be found anywhere else. With that in mind, he asked Vivian if she remembered the big red, heart-shaped fruit they used to eat together. She remembered immediately the tomato fruit. It was so delicious that thinking about it made her drool, and a single bite filled a person with enough energy to blow away even a cold. Ryudo added that tomato didn't just energize the body, it overflowed with mana. He believed that if he could cultivate tomato in his father's fields, it would provide great support to the magical army. Just then, something on the ground caught his attention. Vivian asked if he had found a tomato, but it turned out to be the dung of a Rockbear. To her confusion, he looked extremely excited. His excitement made sense once he pointed out the small tomato seedling growing from it. Vivian questioned his sanity, reminding him that it was dung. He clarified immediately that they weren't going to eat the dung, he simply wanted the seedlings. He then asked if she remembered how Rockbears loved tomato fruits, and how the two of them had been beaten up repeatedly trying to take those fruits. Annoyed, she admitted she remembered it all too well and declared it unforgivable. Ryudo explained that the seeds left in Rockbear droppings sprouted all at once during spring. Vivian still found it disgusting and told him not to touch such things so casually. She suggested they search for ripe fruits instead. However, he reasoned that ripe tomato fruits were large and heavy, and even with a large bamboo basket, they would only be able to carry a small number back home. His plan was to gather seeds instead, then sprout and cultivate them so they could have an abundant supply whenever they wished. Vivian agreed that his plan did sound good, but firmly stated that she would not be going anywhere near wild animal dung. With that, she walked off, leaving him to handle the seedlings himself. Ryudo began collecting the seeds, thinking that this was a perfect opportunity to gather as many as possible, since the Rockbear was supposed to be hibernating. Remembering the method his father had taught him, he carefully used a special tray designed to remove seedlings without damaging their roots, gently lifting the soil around them. Just then, Vivian started shouting his name. He asked her to stay quiet for a moment, explaining that he needed to focus or the delicate seeds would break. But in the very next instant, she grabbed him and shoved him aside. A monstrous claw tore through the space where his head had been, missing him by mere inches. Both of them dropped to the ground, and Vivian urgently asked if he was all right. Ryudo quickly thanked her for saving him. The creature looming over them was a Rockbear. Judging from its aggression, they realized it must have awakened from hibernation just moments ago. Ryudo could hardly believe it had woken up this early in the year. This was the worst possible situation. Rockbears were usually calm, but once awakened suddenly, they fought with desperate ferocity. Their fur was as hard as stone, giving the monster its name, and its claws could shatter actual rock with overwhelming force. A single swipe from those claws was enough to leave even a warrior's finest shield, said to be the pinnacle of defensive gear, completely beyond repair. The beast standing before them was none other than the guardian of Tatis Forest, the dreaded Ashen Bear. The rock bear was known as a magical beast native to the Portos Forest, and as its name suggested, its fur was as hard as rock, its most defining trait. Despite its massive and intimidating appearance, it primarily fed on plants and generally avoided conflict. However, the rock bears living in the Tatis jungle had mutated under the jungle's unique magical power. Their bodies had grown several times larger than those of regular rock bears found outside, and they had come to be known as the guardians of the Tatis jungle. Just as the beast was about to strike, Ryudo called out to Vivian, urging that this was their chance to escape. Vivian, however, was focused solely on giving him a kiss so they could merge. Ryudo quickly pushed her aside and saved her just as the rock bear unleashed a powerful blow aimed at them. He apologized but reminded her that they were in serious danger and had no time for anything else. She sprang back up and yelled that they needed to perform the ritual, but he repeated that there was no time, which left her irritated. Even so, she skipped the ritual and agreed to merge with him, granting him her strength. Sitting in the back seat, she continued yelling that he had no emotions at all, and he simply responded that he heard that quite often. But first, they had a massive beast standing right in front of them. In that urgent moment, Ryudo used green magic to form a shield to block its next attack. Almost immediately, he realized he may have made a mistake. The rock bear's claws were strong enough to destroy even the special-grade shield of a brave warrior, and compared to that, his improvised shield, created without proper incantation or technique, stood little chance. But it was already too late. The rock bear struck him with full force while he pushed back, desperately trying to hold the shield in place. The beast's power was overwhelming, and Ryudo had no idea how he was supposed to overcome this. Yet he remained calm. First, he strengthened his body and then poured all the mana he had into the shield. With that, he managed to push the giant rock bear back and even knocked it off its feet. Ryudo himself was shocked to see that his wooden shield remained completely unscathed. More than that, he couldn't comprehend how he had managed to repel a rock bear's attack in the tree sea. But realization struck soon enough. He could feel that the amount of mana he was receiving here was incomparable to what he had access to when merging with the green goddess outside the Sea of Trees. Meanwhile, Vivian questioned why he looked so surprised and reminded him that when they were young, he often used her mana to play with the monsters in the Sea of Trees. As soon as she said that, he finally remembered she was right. In the Tatis jungle, not only monsters and plants were affected, his own mana vessel had no known limit here. He recalled that the two of them really did play together back then, though most of the time he was simply running away. But while he was lost in thought, the rock bear was already charging straight at him once again. He managed to step aside just in time, and the beast slammed headfirst into a tree. Ryudo calmly positioned himself behind it, taking a moment to absorb the feeling of thick mana surging endlessly through his body. He had come all this way to collect Tame and had no intention of returning empty-handed. Now that the rock bear stood in his way, he understood that there was only one path left: to hunt it down. He formed a massive sword using green magic, and with a single decisive swing, he sliced the rock bear cleanly in half, defeating it in one blow. As the beast lay lifeless before him, he vowed that its precious life would not go to waste, offering it a respectful acknowledgement. Vivian remarked that when it came to hunting, he was surprisingly ruthless, completely different from how gentle he had been with the Moonwolves. He explained that this situation was entirely different, and there had been no need to kill the Moonwolf, a creature known as the guardian of the ecosystem. Even though it felt somewhat selfish, he understood that hunting was necessary for human survival. Just like this rock bear, once its essence was drained, its fur softened and could be used during Portos Village's harsh winters. Its gallbladder was valuable for making high-quality medicine, and its claws and fangs could be fashioned into staves and magical tools. Above everything else, its meat was nutrient-rich and incredibly delicious. A short while later, Ryudo had finished dismantling the entire rock bear. The next problem was figuring out how to carry everything back to the village. He looked to Vivian for help, but she immediately refused, insisting that she disliked heavy labor. He then asked if she could at least carry the tomato seeds, but she rejected that too. Those were something she absolutely did not want to touch. Unsure of what to do next, he began thinking, and suddenly, an idea came to him. Meanwhile, his mother, waiting at home, grew worried since he had been gone since morning. Just then he returned at last, carrying an enormous bag that left her completely stunned. She questioned what could possibly be inside. Ryudo opened the bag and showed her everything he had gathered, surprising her even more. He often brought home unexpectedly large prey, but this time it was far beyond anything he had ever carried back. He explained that he had used forest leaves, known for their sterilizing properties, and enlarged them to create a giant wrap. Then he reinforced the vines and tied everything together with his usual rope skills. After that, he enhanced his body with green mana, allowing him to carry the massive Rockbear. Even though visions of magic flooded into his mind, he had only been able to perform these strange spells because of the mana he received from Vivian and the forest. For that, he thanked her. Vivian responded that it was all true, and now that she was merged with him, she could clearly feel everything as well. 4 years ago, she reminded him he had not been able to handle this mana at all, but over the years, both his mana vessel and mana engine had grown tremendously. In the end, all of this had been possible only because of his own hard work. His mother praised him for bringing such high-quality meat, and since there was so much of it, she decided that they should share it with everyone in the village and turn it into a full Rockbear festival. She told him to take his time and rest for a while, assuming he must have been exhausted after fighting such a beast. But he wasn't tired at all. In fact, he wanted to plant all the new seeds he had gathered from the forest before they wilted. His mother reminded him that motivation was good, but if he pushed himself too hard, he wouldn't last. He assured her there was nothing to worry about, explaining that he had been training his body at the academy. Vivian, however, agreed with his mother and advised him to rest his mana core. He appreciated that she was worried as well, but he genuinely didn't feel fatigued. His body still carried some leftover mana from the forest. Besides, he wanted to show his mother that his father's field was as fruitful as it used to be, and he also wanted to deliver the crops to the royal capital as soon as possible. Because of that, he couldn't afford to wait, and if his calculations were correct, he was certain that a large number of tomatoes would bear fruit in the coming summer. Later on, when he began working in his father's field, Vivian found the process of planting seeds surprisingly fascinating, and she looked forward to watching him plant the rest. But then he suddenly stopped and began thinking deeply about something. She asked him what was wrong and whether something was missing. He replied that he was imagining how the tomatoes would grow and how much space he needed to leave between each plant. He remembered that this step was something his father had always emphasized. His father taught him that spacing between plants was crucial. If the plants were too close together, the crops would end up fighting one another. Their roots would compete for territory, and when that happened, the plants wouldn't grow properly and would become weak and sick. Little Ryudo had once tried to plant the crops far apart so they wouldn't fight, but his father immediately stopped him. His father explained that planting them too far apart would reduce the harvest, and besides, the vegetables would feel lonely. Thinking back on these memories brought a smile to his face, and he continued working in the field, applying everything his father had taught him. After some time, he finished planting everything he had brought. Vivian was surprised to see that he was done already, especially since there were still plenty of unused fields left. He explained that he had only brought a single basket of seeds, which was nowhere near enough for such a large area. She then asked how long it would take to fill the entire field with tomatoes, and he told her that if they kept planting seeds in early spring and started harvesting in summer, they could extract more seeds from those crops and drastically increase their supply for the following year. However, that answer wasn't what she wanted to hear. She had no intention of waiting an entire year. Ryudo admitted that he was feeling the pressure as well. With monster-producing gates opening everywhere, the exhausted kingdom army desperately needed immediate food support. Because of that, he didn't have the luxury of taking things slowly. To solve this problem, he had come up with an idea to rapidly mass-produce tomatoes using green magic, but he would need her help. She agreed to assist, but she asked what exactly he planned to do, since no amount of green mana could instantly produce tomato fruits. With green magic, she said, she could connect plants with mana to make them swell, stretch, harden, or alter their properties, but she couldn't accelerate their growth. In addition to green, she explained, there were 4 other powers involved in plant growth: white, which provided light; blue, which spread water; red, which provided heat; and black, which promoted decay and regeneration. Ryudo told her that those were precisely the elements he intended to use. That was why he was attempting a new form of composite magic this time. She asked whether he had learned this magic combination at the academy, and he explained that wasn't the case at all. Composite magic wasn't something one could learn simply by mixing 2 powers together. In most cases, humans had a high aptitude for only one of the 5 types of mana, which made it rare for anyone to possess an affinity for more than 2. Even among those who had the aptitude, only a few could actually use magic, and the balance of mana varied from person to person. For someone like Ryudo, precedence and existing experience were of little use. Most of the magic ended up being creative, improvised, and unique to the user. He had even tried discovering talents beyond green magic during his time at the academy, but naturally, things had not gone well. Still, over those 4 years he had read almost every book in the library, and even though he could not wield other elements, he had memorized all the basic magical formulas. For plants to grow, they required 3 essentials: water, light, and nutrients. The soil here was already fertile from being left fallow, and there was plenty of water thanks to the melting snow. That meant the only thing needed for rapid growth was light. With that in mind, he used his magic to connect the young tomato seeds with green mana. After that, he added a touch of basic white magic vitality. To his surprise, the crops immediately began growing at a remarkable speed. Within moments, they were fully grown. Both he and Vivian were astonished. She even commented that not even the great deity would know about such a magic combination. Now that the tomatoes were ripe, Vivian immediately transformed into her cat form and climbed up the tree, eager to taste them. She was stunned by how large and beautiful they were, completely incomparable to anything she had seen in the jungle. She transformed back into her true form and took a bite. Just one taste left her mind completely overwhelmed with delight. The tomato was unbelievably delicious, and she devoured the entire thing without hesitation. It felt as though she had stepped into a different world, and the flavor alone made her feel like she could fill her entire stomach with nothing but those fruits. Meanwhile, Ryudo called up to her from the ground, asking if the tomatoes had ripened properly, but in the middle of speaking, he suddenly felt dizzy and collapsed. Vivian noticed and hurriedly asked if he was all right. Ryudo realized that by forcing the plants to grow rapidly, ignoring natural timing, seasons, and the usual flow of growth, he had placed far more strain on his mana engine than expected. It became clear that cultivating crops entirely through magic was unrealistic. Vivian rushed down to him, saying she had already warned him to rest after hunting those rock bears. He admitted that he had indeed pushed himself too much. No matter how deep the bottom of his mana vessel was, overusing the mana engine that converted that mana would still leave him completely mana depleted, and that was exactly what had happened. She also warned him that if he wore out his mana engine any further, he might never be able to use magic again. He thanked her for worrying so much, assuring her that he was all right now. He was simply glad to see how happy she looked while eating those tomatoes, and because of that, he believed everything he had done was worth it. His words left her speechless for a moment. She began to blush and suddenly found herself unable to argue with him any further. Meanwhile, he remained clueless as ever and asked what she was murmuring under her breath. Embarrassed, she quickly replied that it was nothing and shoved a tomato into his mouth so he could taste his own harvest. With just one bite, he was stunned by how much mana overflowed from the fruit. He even began to wonder if it could be used as a mana potion, but more than anything, he felt pure happiness. Seeing how his father's once overgrown field had transformed into such a fruitful land filled him with pride.